Hello, everybody. Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm José.
I'm Mike.
And today we're going to talk about The Little Stranger, which we've just seen in the prettiest theatre in England, I think. It's the prettiest one I've been to, in Evesham.
The Regal cinema in Evesham.
Yes.
Which was lovely. We went out there, we made the trip out there to see it because we missed it in Birmingham.
Yes.
We forgot about it. And then one of our listeners reminded us to see it.
Yes.
Which was kind of her. And it was the only place it was showing.
Yes.
Nearby, so
It was a lovely kind of Sunday ride there, and kind of the skies was beautiful and everything. But the cinema itself is like this little Art Deco jewel, really. Green with lots of gold and all the geometric shapes and the doors and the lamps. The staircase is beautiful. The bathrooms also. I mean, it really is kind of something to see. I would recommend people just, go to Evesham just to see this cinema.
it's a nice place. And worth mentioning, it's clearly a repurposed sort of musical theatre, really, and it's still used as such.
Yes.
You can tell because in the some of the promos before the film, there were local promos for shows on there with live singing.
Yeah.
So it's not just a cinema, and obviously, and the screen itself there's a slight hodgepodge element to the way the screen's been installed.
Yes.
Which is not. I don't mean that sounds like a criticism, but it's a multi-purpose room.
But it was actually very blissful to see it.
Yeah,
it was incredibly pretty.
What's really nice is it's got 2 levels, so we sat on the balcony.
Yes.
And on the lower level, it's like it's a club, so it's seats round tables.
Yes,
it's really nice.
It's like an old-fashioned. It's like a Hollywood
with the bar
Ciro's or something, the Trocadero or someplace like that. It's really lovely.
Yeah, like you feel like the screen really should have been clouded by cigar smoke.
Yes, it would have been perfect, ideal had that been the case.
It's really nice. Having said that, actually, I mean, the film has The Little Stranger has kind of a washed out look to it, I think, which emulates that some way. I couldn't tell actually if that was. I can't tell how much of that was designed aesthetically and how much of that was due to using a digital projector, because there were times, particularly later in the film, where there are some very visually dark scenes where the blacks are really washed out in the image, and the contrast is very poor. And I wonder if seeing it projected on film would have
made a difference.
Well, I mean, it does typically, but I wonder if it would have in this film. I don't know how much of it was built in.
Well, you can tell that the film has been carefully designed, right? So there's like a color scheme, and there are some shots, for example, where you see the Domhnall Gleeson character through a window, and basically his face is all washed out, and so I think there's a sense in which it's purposeful. But on the other hand, there were times when you thought, is this the way it's meant to look? Yeah, it was too washed out. And actually, I felt that was kind of a little bit of the problem with the film as well.
It's directed by Lenny Abramson. Who he's an Irish film director, and this film is made with Irish money, at least in part. The Irish Film Board, I think.
Right.
Though it's set in Warwickshire.
Yes.
In 1948, it was a pleasure to hear a couple of very broad sort of Brummie accents in the mix, which was nice.
Yes.
But a lot of it is that very clipped sort of upper middle class English that is a staple of sort of Merchant Ivory and that type of thing.
It's like the most English film I've seen this year. Everyone is repressed, and everyone's obsessed with class, and everybody wants to live in the big house.
Lenny Abramson directed his last 2 films were Room
from
2015, for which Brie Larson won the Oscar.
Yes.
And Frank from 2014 with Michael Fassbender. It was a story of Frank Sidebottom. Both of which films I had problems with, and I'm not really keen on Lenny Abramson as a director, I think.
Yes.
But I think the films had their pleasures as well. But actually, I came out of both of those films feeling they could have been better directed somehow, and this I feel is a lot better in that respect. I think there's
Because I thought...
I don't think it's brilliantly directed, but it has a tone, it has a consistency of tone.
But it has too much of a consistency of tone. I mean, okay, the reason why I'm frustrated with the film is because, to me, I'm not clear on, I'm not clear on what happened.
Well, I think there's ambiguity sort of designed into the story. It's not just... I think it's the problem, actually, that one of the other patrons in the cinema was saying this on his way out, that there's a lot of mumbling.
It was very hard to hear what the characters were saying. I couldn't decipher. I mean, all of the opening dialogue, I couldn't decipher any of it. And, particularly the young maid, right? Like, I just could not understand what they were saying.
There were points where clearly the dialogue is important, and you just miss it.
Yeah.
And you don't get a chance to go back because it's a film and you can't rewind it.
Yes.
And I mean, I wasn't the only one to think that, clearly.
No, I thought the same. I mean, I think this film, to me, it has so many problems. I mean, Doug Poulter, is that his name?
Will Poulter.
Will Poulter. I think he's terrible. I think...
and we loved him in Detroit.
I love him as an actor, actually. But this one, it seems like he's horribly miscast. The makeup is obtrusive. It's like his performance doesn't exceed the makeup in a way, and it's almost like the makeup, encases him in. So, I think that character is wasted. I also think that Gleeson is too much of a one-note performance. It's all kind of restrained, closed in. And actually, initially it has a certain mystery, right? But then there's no variation in the rest of the performance, which bothered me. So I think Ruth Wilson is fantastic. Charlotte Rampling is, a cinema magic. Like, she's just got such presence that every time she appears, there seems to be something else going on, which is really interesting, right? And she brings a kind of mystery as well. But, in a film that keeps returning to the same moments. So kind of, let's just say what it is. The story is about, a young kid who in
1919.
In 1919 goes to visit this grand house with his mother, who used to be a maid at this house, and sneaks into the house and is overwhelmed by how grand and beautiful it is, and he steals an acorn off of a painting.
He breaks it off the picture frame.
That's right. Anyway, and so then the film begins when he's now been, in the service. He's been a doctor in various places, and he's returned home, and he's now a doctor, right? And the original return to this grand house is so that he can treat the eldest son.
No, it's so he can treat the maid.
Oh, the maid,
right
that's
at the
right.
Start. And but he obviously meets the eldest son there, Will Poulter's character, who is horribly disfigured.
Yes.
He's got all his burns all over his face and his leg, and he limps awfully.
Yes.
His legs sort of turned in.
So the film structure, constantly returns us to this moment of the child in the house. Sometimes it does so through, him glimpsing himself as a little shadow in a picture, as a bit of a shoulder on a picture. But actually, there's all these flashbacks to the kid in the house, right? So, and then as the film unfolds, you begin to sense the importance of that. And also you begin to sense, that the doctor's machinations in coming into possession of the house, really.
Yeah, a little bit. And it's also important to say that it's a horror film in a form. It's it's kind of a gothic-y, very repressed English horror for the sophisticates, but it's got like a kind of Hereditary feel in a way. Like, it doesn't go as nuts as Hereditary, but it has that kind of growing sense of unease as to something going on.
Yes. Okay, so can we now move on to spoilers?
Yeah. Let's say that's the end of non-spoiler territory.
Because I thought as horror, it didn't work. Like, I wasn't scared at all at any time. In terms of a supernatural thriller, you never got a sense of, the possibility of otherworldliness, really, or I didn't, right? And in terms of a whodunit, it's not rendered clear either, right? So kind of those are the kind of three, genres that intermesh in this, and I found each of those iterations, or the way that the film performs each of those things, very unsatisfactory.
I never expected a resolution to the mystery of exactly what was going on and what was and whether these were kind of shared hallucinations or whether something is actually happening in this house. I never expected a resolution to that, and I'm glad that there wasn't one.
But you see, I thought that there was one.
Go on.
I thought the doctor did it. I thought I'm not too clear on the sister that died, right?
Yeah, the young girl dies right. She dies before even the film starts.
But I don't think we're told how she died.
No, I don't recall. Or maybe it was mumbled.
But she died shortly after his visit.
Yeah.
As a child. But then, he packs off the brother to a sanitarium, right? So he's treating the brother, and the brother kind of ends up in a sanitarium. Then the thing with the mother, he was there, and then the thing about the Ruth Wilson character being pushed down the stairs, then you have a flashback to him as a child going into exactly the same spot. And then he ends up in possession of the house. So, to me, the clear implication is that he's done it all.
Right. Did he end up in possession of the house? They didn't get married in the end.
No, they don't get married, but, he's walking through the house and he's fixing things in it at the end.
Oh, right, okay, sorry, yeah.
So, I mean,
Okay, no, that's fair enough. I guess I didn't put that together. But
maybe I'm wrong.
No, well, I mean, I think that's fair enough, but I wasn't adding things up, possibly.
Well, maybe.
But that's a consistent reading with what you've shown. Put it that way, so that's fair enough. But I'm not sure that it's out to scare in that way. It's not that kind of horror.
No, it's not.
It does have a couple of there are a couple of sort of staples in that you've got that door slamming without anyone touching it, and kind of an overwhelming sensory overload when Charlotte Rampling's locked in the room, and you got all the bells going off at once, that sort of thing. So it has a couple of bits, but they're not kind of throughout the film. There's a period in the film where that kind of happens.
Yes.
But it's really about the psychological effect, and what I think the film gets right is, and again to compare it to Hereditary in a way that Hereditary really didn't, it's the idea of the themes of the film kind of speaking through the horror in a way. And I don't think it's the case that they speak kind of directly, but this ultimately this is a really English story, and all English stories at their core are about class.
Yes.
And this is undeniably completely about class.
Yes.
And social climbing and kind of hatred of the people who you aspire to be, kind of because you can't be them, or because you hate that they have it and you don't. That's totally what Domhnall Gleeson's character is all about. He came from absolutely nowhere. His mum was a maid. Yeah. He's made it to the town doctor.
He's made it to middle class.
So exactly, and he plays the part, right? He doesn't speak like a yokel. He doesn't speak like a kid whose mum was a maid. He speaks in that snippy, kind of short, cut off, middle class way.
Well, actually, he's got a line that I've heard that friends of mine have echoed, which is, that kind of class mobility through education. One of the effects is that it makes you be embarrassed by and hate your own parents. There's a line, that Gleeson's character says. I'm sure I'm not quoting it properly.
I don't remember it,
but it's to that effect. Yes.
Well, it's interesting to me. There's a line because the film is set around the time that the NHS was being developed and about to be introduced, and he's talking to another doctor, a friend of his, and Gleeson says something along the lines of, I'm not sure about the NHS, this NHS thing. people want to look up to their doctors. Which basically means I want people to look up to me.
Yeah.
Because the other doctor then kind of pushes back and says, nonsense, people just want a doctor who does the job.
Yes.
That sort of thing. So he's very proud of himself.
Yes.
And he does seem to have these as you say, kind of machinations on this house.
Yes.
That he was absolutely spellbound with as a child, and it's not an accident that we keep coming back to that when he was about 8 years old. But then it also there's the horror element is this kind of psychological terrorization of the family, and it comes through this little girl who was also at this I think it was Empire Day celebration in 1919, who, it's funny, you see her in photographs, but in the flashback you never see her face on. She's always obstructed by something. She's always it's behind someone's shoulder or just turned around or whatever. Oh no! Excuse me. Apart from when you eventually see her in the house, once you finally there's a kind of elliptical element to the flashbacks. I mean, you can tell what's going on, but it shows you different bits at different times. And when you finally get to the point where you see the 8-year-old Domhnall Gleeson break the acorn off the picture frame, the girl's right there, and she watches him do it, and that's when he gets slapped in the face by his mum.
And she questions him.
Yeah.
She says something like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" or something.
I think so.
Right. So he's conscious of her having caught him.
Yeah.
And
I'm not sure she does say anything. I think it might be someone else when she comes in. No, I think the mum comes in and says, "What the hell are you doing here?" But I don't think the girl says anything. But she does look at him, and then she looks back.
Okay. I could be misremembering that,
Yeah.
but they definitely have a communication, and then it's almost like the mother grabs him, and so that he goes out of frame, because basically there's a point of view that's kind of dictated by the banisters around the staircase. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she moves him out of her point of view. But I don't know. To me, you see, there's a whole nasty reading of this, because I think the film seems to me to be really anti-working class.
Okay.
So the sympathy is all with this grand family who, for whatever reasons, and, inheritance tax, the conservative inheritance tax, which was at 75%, is blamed for it. So basically, it's socialism that's to blame for this lovely grand family to have lost their fortune and for the house to be in a dilapidated state. And so on. And they're shown to be like kind of lovable, eccentric, upper class people. And of course, the nasty villain is the working class guy who wants, who's now middle class and, who, wants to take it away from them. So I kind of... Anyway, that's a reading, right?
Yeah.
So and that seems to me like pretty hateful, really. You're quiet. What are you thinking?
No, I'm not trying to disagree with you or anything. I'm not like looking for ways to go, "Oh, I don't be wrong about this somehow."
I'm not even suggesting that you would. I'm just wondering, what you're thinking, what you think.
Well, I just hadn't really thought about it that way. I had thought about it in terms of class, and I thought about it in terms of this guy's really peculiar kind of self-loathing, like, as we've already said, the idea that you both want what they have and hate
who you are,
and hate the fact that you want it in a way. Like it's because clearly he's not happy with himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so keen to get into the place.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know.
And there's that horrible first dinner where he's invited, and it has to be like reiterated like many times that he's there as a guest, not just as the servant physician, doing his duty, right?
And he says as much in the narration as well. He says, "I was there to make up the numbers."
Yes.
He's telling you his story.
Yes.
His version of events.
Yes. That's interesting as well, actually. So let's backtrack a bit, because I'd forgotten that. He is the narrator, isn't he? So you are seeing everything from his point of view. And you also know at the end that he lies, because, when there's an inquest, about, is it
Caroline, yeah.
Caroline's death, you know, the maid says, oh, she was very happy. She was obviously delighted. She'd made a decision. She was going to sell off, go to America. But he says, no, no, no. You know, it was suicide. Well, clearly, you know, it wasn't suicide, right? So, yeah, kind of. I think all of that was interesting, really, to me, and it kind of supports my argument. Really, it is the, you could argue that it's the revenge of the working class on, the local ruling family, but on the other hand, you could also argue that it's the working class that's kind of blamed for the destruction of the local family, of this very nice group of people.
Yeah. Oh, and ultimately, you're right. Then the sympathy lies with them. But then on the other hand, it's not clear until really towards the end that that Domhnall Gleeson's character is the villain that you think he is. I mean,
I saw it coming.
Okay.
And
I think for me, it was only once he kind of coerced Caroline into getting engaged to him.
Yes.
Then I started to think that.
Yes.
Until then, he was a friend of the family, and actually, I felt the moment in the car, although it kind of turns bad, was initially romantic. I thought.
Well, I thought so too. I mean, so, but my thing is also because I was thinking this is also a kind of whodunit, because halfway through the film, you get the sense it's not a supernatural thriller, right? There's not going to be a monster or a ghost or, the house is not going to come alive, So then I begin to think, well, it has to be a whodunit, really, right? And then kind of once I began to think of, in that sense, then he was the only, possibility, really. So yes, but there were moments where, and actually that was interesting, because on the one hand he's such a recessive figure, he's so closed in, you do get the sense of a period and a time, where every word spoken is a measured word because it can have so many consequences, right? So that aspect of being like completely closed in, I think that's very good, but then it has to change, later on, and so it's in that sense that I find his performance kind of a bit unsatisfactory, because, once it's clear that he is coercing her into marriage, my God, he buys her wedding dress and headgear and has her measured, all without her knowing, right? Like, yeah.
I don't think his performance doesn't change. I think that's being a little bit unfair, and I think it may be the case that you, having kind of seen it coming earlier, were more prepared for that, whereas what I saw was his performance being slightly modulated. He does get snippier. He does get, he's slightly quicker to sort of anger or kind of demand that people shut up and listen to him a little bit. He gets a little bit less friendly, and I think but he doesn't change very much, but it's the context within which his character is operating that changes, and that affects the way he behaves within it.
No, I suppose I would largely agree with you. So the performance does change and so on, but in a very minor key. My feeling is that it should have changed in a larger key.
That's fair enough. But like I said, I think it was the changing circumstances and the changing kind of idea of who he was, and the idea that he might not be such a good person underneath it. Then, that was the context within which I kind of felt him change. If you see what I mean?
Yes.
As opposed to it being just a straight up kind of shift in performance style.
Yes.
I can see what you mean though, but it's like I don't really. I didn't have a problem with the performance. I must say, I thought he was pretty good.
There is something. There is something, I don't know, magnetic or entrancing about the performance, that about the closed in and so on. So, I don't want to diss it.
Yeah.
Because it is compelling in some way. But I do think to keep everything on such a minor register is to me a mistake.
Fair enough. But then, as we were saying in the car, It's a room with a view with a pond and a lake. The Eddie Izzard thing of how all English films are just people walking into rooms and going, oh, what is it? Oh, it's a lot like that. I mean, there is no, apart from maybe the bit where Charlotte Rampling goes mental in the room.
Yes.
There's really no kind of higher register to it. And actually, I'm said that. I mean, as kind of interesting as your reading of it as having been down to Domhnall Gleeson's characters, kind of behind everything, that doesn't explain really what happens in that room.
Well, I mean, part of my dissatisfaction with the film is, and I'm not absolutely certain about any of this, right? So it's just an argument, but part of my dissatisfaction for the film is that if the film is a whodunit, part of the payoff is that you always show the audience how it happened, right? Whereas here, all that you see is the door being shut, right? Being shaken, right? And then she's pushing out, and then somebody pushes in, right? And then it cuts, and she's lying in bed with her veins cut open.
But there's also there's a ton of noise going on in the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And the question is, what's happening? Is it in her head? Is it just the soundtrack kind of emphasizing the feeling, whatever?
Yeah.
But also you get a shot from the other side of the door, and there's nobody there.
Oh.
Which is not to say that it must be a ghost, or because it could be the film lying to you. If it's Domhnall Gleeson's story and he's the one telling it, then he's allowed to leave out whatever he likes or change whatever he likes.
Yes.
Maybe it's not just the narration that's unreliable. Maybe it's the whole storytelling of the whole film that's unreliable. But also, I guess I didn't discount the idea that it could be supernatural in a really low key way. That as I say, with that kind of with that feeling of there's something under here that's bubbling and making everyone uneasy and preying on the women in the family in a weird way as well.
Yes. Well, you see, the reason why I think he did it is, in a way, he knows the house like even the inhabitants don't, right? Because that moment where you see him going in, the house is barred as a child, right? But then he enters through the kitchens, and then you see him going through the back corridors, right, that take him right to the house. So he's familiar with all these servants' paths through the house, right? And then just that shot, the final shot with him as a child looking over the same banister that Carolyn has been thrown out of, right? To me, it just kind of makes that connection. Yeah. And then, and then back to him kind of, walking through the house that he's now fixing up, which to me implies, that he's bought it, right? So
that's fair enough.
But it's very unsatisfactory because, the reason why I keep saying it's a theory, it's an idea, or it's my take or interpretation, is because actually I'm not sure, and actually if it is a whodunit, then I would, we deserve to know how, right? And if it's a ghost story, kind of, it's not really. You never see anything, and if it's a horror story, it should be more scary, So, on all those three grounds, I find it very unsatisfactory. Now, if it's a symbolic kind of psychological thriller where things are meant to stand in for something else, and in a way that maybe I'm not getting, I'm open to that.
Again, I was thinking about things. I was thinking about the symbolism of the acorn. What that might mean. I don't think it's an accident. It's an acorn. It's like this acorns, they grow into huge, sturdy oak trees.
That's right.
Is that what's happened to his character in some way? Like the acorn of him as the 8-year-old is sprouted and become. But then I'm like, oh, that's meaningless.
Well, Caroline says that they all used to steal those acorns, but kind of maybe the acorn could stand in for the family that he's ripped, right? Because I mean, the whole idea behind these houses is they're the family seat for 200 years or 600 years or whatever, right? And then the family's destroyed and the house changes ownership, right? So
that's like the start of his corrupting influence on it.
Could be. I mean, I think the film has to be saying something by the constant return to that moment, right? So, and basically what happens is at the beginning of the film, the family's in quite bad shape. And actually, I thought those were some of the better aspects of the film. You get a feeling of the sense of damp and kind of poverty inside this grand house, really. Um, so the family's in bad shape, but you also see Sev vases and grand furniture, and they own extensive grounds, right? So it's kind of a relative poverty in a way, right? So the family's still there, but by the end of it, they're all gone. So actually, it's the ultimate destruction of the family, right? So this ripping of the acorn, this removing of kind of the seed, I think is there. And particularly, there's also that moment, which is a moment of transformation where, so the brother was burned in battle, and he's completely scarred from like head to toe. The Poulter character, right? And there's that moment where he can't face going down for dinner, right? And he goes to talk to him, and and the tone changes there. So he's talking to him almost the way that like a superior officer would command a soldier.
Yeah, pull yourself
right?
together.
Yeah, so yeah. So he gets him out of the picture. He removes power of attorney from him to the sister, right? So that he no longer has decision-making powers over the estate. I mean,
yeah, but I mean, as I said, there's also he can't be in control of everything. He's not in control, for instance, of the dog that mauls the girl.
No, he's not.
That's something that happens, and that's.
But you see that you're told that it's the dog who did it, right?
Well, you see it happen.
Okay, you see it. So that's even more my case, because that's kind of explained, right? Everything else is alluded to rather than explained.
Yeah. What about this? The film is really kind of woman heavy in a way, and there's something going on. The people who Will Poulter's character has already been injured and disfigured. The people in the film who are disfigured or who die are women. There's the little girl. Is it Susan?
Yes.
Who's the little girl from 1919 who died shortly after that party. It was said to be the last day she was happy, or something. And then it's this little girl whose parents bring her to that dinner, who's mauled by the dog, but she lives. And then it's Charlotte Rampling who commits suicide, or maybe she's killed,
or is driven to suicide.
Yeah, and then it's Caroline, and it's. I don't think it's a misogynist film, but I think in a way it's about misogyny. There is misogyny, kind of. There's casual misogyny, particularly with like for instance at the party scene with the other doctor who works in, the big fat bloke who's says a couple of pretty derogatory things about women. It's always women that this happens to, and he says some derogatory things about Caroline, which clearly Domhnall Gleeson is not thrilled with him saying that.
But on the other hand, the film kind of, to me, suggests that Caroline is like a lesbian. The one moment that she comes alive in the film is when she's dancing with the other girl, and you can really see her like let loose and be alive and lively and laughing and having fun in a way that never happens in the rest of the film.
There's a feeling of her being trapped.
Yes.
In a way, like she's sort of, she's bright and she's
capable and can do and
always talked down to
yes.
by men, really,
yes.
and controlled, or people attempt to control her at least. But there is a feeling of her being trapped, like you know, like the house is a sort of really twisted fairy tale castle. Well, not twisted, I suppose. That's what fairy tale castles were. They were places to trap women.
Yes. Rapunzel, let down your hair.
But then I suppose the twisted part is Domhnall Gleeson's character. It's like he's not the sort of knight in shining armour. He's there to try and take over the castle and keep her there. Because it's her desire to get out that he can't abide.
You know what I hate about this film?
Yeah.
Most of all, is that it makes me feel that I have to go read Sarah Walter's novel in order to really find out what happened. You know, and to me that's a failure of an adaptation.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
Sarah
Walters.
Yeah, so you know, whatever good elements, you know, and I think the film is very successful at creating a kind of ambience and a kind of a mood and a kind of a recessive, closed-in kind of feel and all of that, you know, which I think it does do. It is successful at doing, but kind of ultimately it's just a failure because, you know, in a way, kind of we just don't know what happens. And actually, you know, we're trying to think, oh, is it this type of film? Is it, you know, we've just seen the film and we're still not clear on what type of film it is.
Well, I think I maybe have a slightly clearer idea of what it was going for than you do. I think you maybe... I think what you're saying about it being a failure as a horror or a failure as a whodunit is basically to say that the film was going for that and didn't make it. And I'm not sure that it was. But then maybe it's a failure that it didn't even try to do those, as much, you know.
Well, you know, kind of structurally, like when it got to the inquest at the end, right, I think, you know, this is exactly the kind of scene that you would expect at a whodunit, right? It even has, like, you know, an inquest scene with a judge, right? Like, you know, trying to establish who did what. And the only person, you know, or the people who really don't know is the audience.
But those scenes are always awful in those films. I mean,
I love them.
I will never accept that the end of Psycho is satisfying. That when you have 20 minutes of the guy explaining that this is what happened.
Well,
you know,
I like them, and I like it in all ranges. I even like, you know, in Murder, She Wrote, when they tell you what happened. Right? So it's fair enough. This is not that kind of film. But in that case, why not go all out and kind of do the, you know, whatever other kind of film you were trying to make? Because it seems to me that this is a hodgepodge of elements, you know, that has settled on some kind of symbolic, elusive register, right? But kind of without working those patternings of illusion through, so that, you know, the audience can latch onto them and make something else with the film.
I don't really have much more to add other than.
Yes. Well, do you recommend?
Not really. No.
No.
I was engrossed. I'll give. I've got to give it that. Like you know, to go back to being the directors, Lenny Abramson, in Room and in Frank, there were long stretches of those films where I wasn't very interested at all. In Frank, it was all over the place. I felt, and in Room, it was like everything was in the room.
Yes.
Was great, and then once she got out,
yes.
Spoilers, I felt the film kind of fell apart for me. But and this film doesn't inspire me to think that he's got any better.
Well,
it does have its tone, and I appreciate that, and I think it's got good performances, and it has a sense of style and period and kind of era and class.
Yes.
That I think are strong.
Yes, I agree.
And I think on top of that, I think although we maybe think it was visually kind of I don't know what the word is, like blurry or faded or whatever. Not blurry, but you know. Sort of, there was a weakness visually, but the kind of production design I thought was fantastic.
Yes.
Apart from the one set that stands in for the centre of the town, which is just like it comes straight out of Coronation Street. It looked really cheap, that. But everything else, everything around the house, I thought was fantastic looking.
I mean, I was quite engrossed until about halfway through, you know, and then actually, you know, towards the end, I kept wanting it to finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Like I've given you your shot.
One thing I would say is that I'm glad that it's a film, and this spoilers by the way. Glad that this is a film that finally killed the dog. See, many films, so many films that I think what it is right. If because is this a 15? I think it might be 15 right. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a 12. No, it's a 12A. But they kill a dog.
Yes.
So, well, because no, this is what's happened in the Meg and in Venom that we just saw. You know, if you want your film to go for 12A, then you show the dog and you put it in peril, and then you let it live. But in this film,
but not here.
Put it down, man. You know,
put it down gently, though.
Put it down gently, but also for doing something that really wasn't its own fault.
Yes.
You know, that girl's winding up that dog. I mean, I thought again the black dog was kind of symbolism. I thought that was pretty straight up, sort of that it's symbolism of Will Poulter's depression.
Yeah.
You know, that's what a black dog is, isn't it? Depression.
Yes, except that the black dog is associated with Carolyn, not with Will Poulter.
Well, that's only because he didn't come out his room. Because he's so depressed.
I think this is... We're now wrapping it up. I don't recommend it.
I don't recommend it either, but I'd be keen to see what other people think, because a couple of people have mentioned this to us. Like, this isn't just, we're going to see whatever's on at the cinema. Like, we paid
made an effort.
We paid attention to this because a couple of people have picked it out and said, I wonder what you think. And, well, that's what we think.
Yes.
But I'm keen to sort of hear their comments, because whether they were disappointed in it or saw something in it that we didn't.
Also, it's a kind of a genuinely puzzling film, so, and I suppose what we've done is kind of offered some interpretations, but really we're not set on them. I mean, it's still kind of, as I said, I feel almost like I have to go and read the novel to really find out kind of what happened. So we would really welcome your feedback and your views on it. So, perhaps the best thing today was not just that the cinema was so pretty and gorgeous to be in. Maybe we just kind of missed some major aspects of the film. And if we
did,
the
dialogue.
Yes, and and if we did, then do feel free to let us know. We'd appreciate it, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. You can listen to us on iTunes and SoundCloud, and our website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com. Oh, we're on YouTube as well. Keep forgetting that one.
Yes, great.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye bye.